Welcome to UFO Classified.
So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am, my skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course the tinfoil hat guy's going to see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it's used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is. You just kind of adapt and overcome.
What are you going to do with all this? You can't even take care of your own files and get them put into the current system, but yet you want to go collect other people's things. So what are you going to do with it? Who are you giving all this to?
It just really struck me about how the common thread seemed to be deception, but deception of a human nature. So that's what I started thinking, who would these folks be? I mean, then I started thinking about the intelligence agencies, what role they could play, and what would be their motivations for getting involved in ufology.
Oh, happy Friday. I hope all of you are home, safe and sound, snuggled away. I am sitting here next to my fireplace, and the wind is swirling outside. And unfortunately, the COVID numbers have now gone through the roof here in Utah. And so I am just sending my love and prayers to all of my listeners from all over the world. I know this is a very trying time for all of us. And so tonight we're going to talk about something uplifting. Alien abductions. Just kidding. Well, we are going to talk about that. But, anyway, so at least it's a change of pace from the daily grind of the news and the negativity and all of these things that so many of us are dealing with, all of us are dealing with right now. So I want to also just give a shout out to all my friends in chat. I know my show was not live last week, and that was really difficult for me not to be with my friends, my people, but there were technical difficulties. My fabulous computer person spent over 3 hours trying to get those sorted out yesterday, and we'll just pray that they are. But I want to also just give a shout out to Sue and her partner. I hope that both of you feel better very, very quickly, and my love goes out to both of you. I want to thank my supporters. I want to thank Mario and everyone for being so wonderful. Scott Brown from In the Field. As you know, because you've been following my show for a long time, I have gone from a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, believing in all of these positive things and that we were working for the greater good of mankind. And through a discovery process, and oftentimes, especially as of late, painful discovery process, I have learned that unfortunately that isn't the case. This isn't all about us working together and volunteering our time and doing the right things. There are so many things at play, so many control systems in place. And believe you me when I tell you that this new form of disclosure is anything but. And so, as I say in multiple shows, run for the hills and do your homework. I want to read a little bit of, because our show tonight with Mady Tobias, who is a great show, it's going to be really fun. I want to read a little bit about what Jacques Vallée said in Forbidden Science for the Spring Hill Chronicles in a section entitled Hummingbird, Wednesday 6th, October 1993. He says, "Lunch with Fred Beckman. We discuss the continuing wave of UFOs nearby Clear Lake and the abduction enigma. Is there a back door to the subconsciousness? Has someone found a way to influence minds to project hallucinatory experiences? Is that why the CIA encourages its puppets to turn up the heat of paranoia in an already bizarre field? Have they secretly restarted MK Ultra?" As I delve further into this, one must ask those questions, and I believe that history shows us a very clear and concise way that, unfortunately, people have been subject of experimentation without consent. The UFO field is a prime field for such manipulation, and that is why my guest, Mady, tonight, we are both talking about some of the things to look out for with regard to cults, with regard to mind control. And then we're also talking about MUFON and the Experiencer Research Team. I want to read another little article here really quickly, not the whole article because it's quite long, but I was thumbing through UFO magazines, and as you know, I've got quite the collection, but I picked up a UFO magazine, Science and Phenomena magazine, and it is dated February-March 2003. In this, there is a story called Cover Stories Torn Away, New Evidence of Active Mind Control by Cheryl Welsh, who has done a lot of research on this. She states, in his paper, The Controllers, A New Hypothesis of Alien Abduction, Martin Cannon proposes that the UFO abduction phenomena may be a continuation of clandestine mind control operations, and that the UFO mythology is a cover story for non-consensual experiments. Admitting that the solid evidence to prove his case is lacking, Cannon does present evidence that military intelligence technology exists and makes comparisons of mind control victims and UFO abductees. Cannon found a significant overlap between the two groups of victims. As director of the nonprofit group Citizens Against Human Rights Abuse, CARA, I have received over 1,800 claims of mind control since 1996. Like Cannon, I have circumstantial evidence to prove my related hypothesis that mental illness is a primary cover story for non-consensual experiments to develop classified weapons technologies that target the brain. Over a decade after he wrote his paper, Cannon's evidence is worth re-examining. Now that the issue of mind control and non-consensual experiments is addressed by European, Russian, and U.S. legislatures, several human rights groups, and notably the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. So there is much more. This is actually a really interesting article. But as I state, I implore all of you to look at different things and to not necessarily jump to the thought that this is extraterrestrial, because there might be something much more nefarious at play. But that is where I'm at. My guest that I'm interviewing tonight, and this is a pre-recorded interview. I'm talking live, but I interviewed Mady yesterday, but she'll be addressing some of these things. She has an incredible bio. Madeline Tobias is a clinical specialist in adult psychiatric and mental health nursing. She has a long career working with individuals recovering from traumatic injuries in destructive cults, sexual trauma, and trauma while serving in the military. In private practice for over 20 years, she joined the staff of the Vet Center, part of the Veterans Administration Medical Center, as clinical coordinator and military sexual trauma specialist from '94 until her retirement in 2012. At the Vet Center, she participated in team supporting and debriefing Veterans Administration witnesses of 9/11 in New York City and New Jersey as well. She helped to organize the Horses for the Heroes program at the VA and had spoken at the Vet Center regional conferences on therapy issues. During this time, she became an approved consultant in eye motion desensitization and reprocessing in the treatment of PTSD. She is retired, living in Virginia. She's a Reiki master and volunteers with patients and families at a local hospice organization. She has a much longer bio, which I have posted on social media and on my website, ufoclassified.com. She has authored several books, including co-authoring with Jana Lalich, Captive Hearts, Captive Minds, and Take Back Your Life. She's written chapters on recovery issues in Recovery from Cults and Cult Recovery, a clinician's guide to working with former members and families, both for the International Cultic Studies Association. She has spoken on both of these issues in the U.S. and Canada. She contributed a chapter for Kathleen Martin's book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted, and How to Cope with Contact by Non-Human Entities. She's appeared on multiple TV shows, radio shows, Sally Jesse Raphael, Oprah Winfrey, and much more. She is a wonderful woman, and so I look forward to playing this pre-recorded interview. This is part one with my guest this evening, Mady Tobias. So, Mady, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks, Erica. It's great to be here. When we talked last week, which wasn't recorded, it brought me back 50 years, almost 50 years, until my beginning experiences with mind control. And I thought I left that far, far behind. So here we are again, bringing up information that I researched so long ago and then thought, I don't have to do this anymore. I could talk about UFOs and experiencers and whatever. Nope. So here we are.
Here we are. I know. And it's really interesting because I don't think either of us anticipated, this type of thing kind of weaving its way into our lives, and especially with you because of all of your life experiences. I'm sure that must be interesting for you. But I want to talk a lot about your life and what you've got a new book out, and I want to talk about that, and then just your progression into the subject. So
yes, okay,
I'm excited.
Oh well, let me begin. My book, Dogs, God, and UFOs, was my effort for me to understand me. It was not to make a book for the general public. Maybe my 18-year-old grandson would someday want to know about his grandmother, because I don't know anything or hardly anything about my grandparents who came over from Russia around the turn of 1900s. So I wanted to make sure that my story was understandable to the next generation or two. So I started journaling, which is what I recommend to everyone who says to me, and many have said to me, why is this happening to me? What does this have to do with that? And I said very simply, if you want to understand you, start a journal. And you could start it with an outline, the year that you remember this particular dream or that particular event or this particular puzzle. Just write them down. And by the time I got to the end of my book, I said, that's who I am. I could do that. I could understand that. And then I wrote down, what did I learn from being in a cult, being an experiencer, working with vets with post-traumatic stress disorder, all kinds of seemingly unrelated things. So if we're going to talk about mind control, let me talk about my mind control, because my mind was controlled.
Yes, and this is fascinating. And I think, like I was saying when we talked off air, I mean, it is so important for people to have a good understanding of that so we don't fall into some of these traps, which are easy for people to do.
Yes, very easy to do. And what happened to me in the 70s is I'm seeing mirrored today by so many people who are searching for the answers. Now, obviously, people have been looking for centuries for the answers to what is the world, why is this happening, why is that happening. But I'll tell you about mine, because it started with a spiritual search, and I think a lot of people are doing that right now. I got married in 1967 after I graduated nursing school and was working for a few years in obstetrics. And my husband and I we don't drink very much, occasional glass of wine. We didn't smoke marijuana. However, a friend of ours gave us a joint. Good friends. And this is what started the whole thing. Now, you have to understand, I was brought up in a Jewish household, culturally Jewish, not religious. Never went to the temple or synagogue. I was not bat mitzvahed. We had a Hanukkah menorah, and we also had a Christmas tree. And we weren't kosher. So here we are. It is 1972, I believe, and we're lighting up this joint like we're going to see. It's supposed to make making love so magical. Well, started smoking it. And is everybody who's listening to this over 18?
Yeah, but but you know what? I'm surprised at how many people under 18 like.
Well, okay, I'll try to watch my language. But I started smoking that cigarette, and so did Ed, and I started hallucinating. Oh my God, I was no longer here. I was in hell. The demons were dancing and shouting and screaming all around me as the devil was raping me. Oh my gosh. I was petrified. It was a scene out of Rosemary's Baby, if you ever saw that movie.
Yeah, I've seen that movie several times. It's actually one of my all-time favorite movies, but it is very, very disturbing.
Yes. So remember that scene now, okay? Mm-hmm. So there I was. I started praying. I started praying to every name of God I could think of. Adonai, Eloheinu, Jehovah. Nothing worked. I was so desperate for help that I even prayed to Muhammad and Allah. Can you imagine, for a Jew?
Wow.
Nothing. Finally, I said the last name a Jewish girl could think of, and that was Jesus. I said, Jesus, help me. Immediately, I was saved, literally out of hell. I was in the midst of calm and a loving presence. Well, let me tell you, that was a shock-a-rooney.
I bet.
So, yeah. No one else who shared that, who had shared that marijuana had any hallucinations or bad experiences. Only me. So after that, I started searching for what the hell happened to me. And I started looking at, well, actually, I was so shocked I didn't do anything at first. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't know how to reference this. I certainly wasn't going to convert. And then shortly after that, friends of ours were moving to Fairfield, Iowa. They had joined the TM movement and got really hooked into that. But they had been falling down drunk alcoholics, and now they were sober. So they told us about, oh, go do TM, you will fly, you will do this, you will do that. Well, who doesn't want to fly, right? Levitate, fly.
That would be fun.
Oh, yeah, great fun. So I spent my $75 or whatever it cost in 1974, and I got my unique mantra. Unique. It's unique for anyone. Friends told me later that there was only 13 of them, so how unique was it? But I did it and I meditated for 2-3 days and had this incredible experience of bliss. It was just beautiful. All of a sudden, I was surrounded by beautiful light and a tremendous feeling of love. That was my second ontological shock. So I went back to the center and I said, oh, what is this? Tell me what I experienced. This is fantastic. And the guy looked at me in the eye and he said, oh, you were just unstressing. I said, unstressing? Come on, give me a break, you know? It's not like I had a big bowel movement. I had been expanded beyond myself. He says, well, if you want to understand, you should take more courses. Of course, so I took more courses. That's what they want you to do, spend money. Well, I took another course, and it didn't explain anything. So they said, well, take another course. You should become a teacher. Go to Maharishi Institute University and spend 3 months there, and you will learn how to levitate. Well, that was out of the question. I had a 2- and a 3-year-old. So I said, forget it. And I continued to meditate, and I started doing research on mysticism. And I read, I knew I'd forget what book it was, William James' book on experiences. Perhaps you can remember it. I have about a half dozen books in front of me, and it's not one of them.
No, I don't.
Oh, the Varieties of Religious Experience, and it's a beautiful book. It was written 100 years ago, and he describes what I experienced. I said, oh, good. I don't have to spend $3,000 and leave my family to pursue the mystical experience. And I did. I studied various Hindu, Buddhist traditions, and even Catholic traditions. I studied everything. I read everything, I should say. And then I started working at the Red Cross, and I met my guru. And this is where it began. He was a co-worker. He was a social worker. He was a nice guy, younger than me. And I was gaining weight, and I wanted to lose weight. And he hypnotized me for weight loss. What I didn't know was what else he suggested to me under hypnosis. I'm a really good hypnotic subject. And it took 10 years for me to go to another hypnotherapist who was recommended to me, who took me back into that hypnotic session, and I found out what he did to me and what he said to me. But in any case, I lost the weight, and I thought he was godly. He knew I was on a mystical path, and he said, well, I have been on it too, and I have achieved what I sought. He became my guru, and I got my master's degree in counseling. I entered his psychotherapy practice. I worked with him for 10 years. In the practice, I managed the practice. I did all the booking. I did all the billing. And when he got into real estate, my family, Ed and I, got into real estate with him. When he opened a mortgage company, I did mortgages. And that's when I realized he was really a thief. Really a thief. He screwed people. He wanted all of us to put in an extra percentage point, which we would then split into the fee. So if you borrowed $200,000, that was $2,000 more you had to spend. I couldn't do it. And I just looked at him in a new light. And as the saying goes, all my doubts were put on a shelf. And then the shelf broke. But I was stuck. I was stuck because my husband and I had invested thousands of dollars in real estate with him, which I was going to lose. In order to join his psychotherapy practice as his partner, which I wasn't his partner, a good piece of my husband's retirement fund went into that, to purchase that. And I had a non-compete clause, so I couldn't open up a practice. I couldn't practice anywhere within 50 miles of his office. I was stuck. I really was stuck, and I was pissed. Thankfully, he decided to retire and move to Florida, and that's when I became free, and that's when I found out the depth of misery he caused other people. He sexually abused clients in horrible ways.
Wow.
His former girlfriend, who broke up with him before he left, broke up with him because her daughters told her about him abusing her.
Oh, my gosh.
So, the sky fell in. I lost thousands of dollars, which, by the way, we sued him and got a little bit back. But mostly, I couldn't understand what happened to me. It almost destroyed my marriage. It's destroyed any faith I had in human nature. How could you trust someone so much? I often wondered in the early days, if he told me to jump out of the window of our office, we're on the 5th floor, would I have done it? I might have, believing I could fly. I don't know. But that's how much control, that's how much I believed in him. Okay? So, 1977, no, was it? Yeah, it was about 1977 that I joined the cult, if you want to call it joining. No one joins a cult. You get hooked into something, but no one knowingly joins a cult. And by 87, he was gone, and I had to find out what happened to me. And that's when I contacted someone from the Cult Awareness Network, which was a large national, international group that helped families and people who were in destructive cults. I didn't know I was one, but I went to one of their therapists in New Jersey. I was living in Connecticut at the time, and she was one of the foremost researchers and therapists in helping people who were in cults. And I said, I want to know if I was in one. And she interviewed me, and she said, you bet. And she explained why and how. And that began my education. I started attending Cult Awareness Network meetings. I did all I could read on cults, on influence, on mind control. And I started lecturing on it and treating former members. And I did that for the next few years. I even wrote a couple of books and contributed chapters to other books that were by CAN, or the International Cultic Studies Association. I went on Sally Jesse Raphael's show. I was on Oprah Winfrey about my book.
That's incredible.
So, what was incredible about Oprah's show is that she flew me to Chicago, great hotel, wonderful meals. I learned to enjoy certain foods that I wouldn't have. I forgot what it was that I loved, a dessert. Anyway, and I was on her show. She showed my book. The book was Captive Hearts, Captive Minds, and showed the book. And I was all set to be a #1 best-selling author. Wrong. Do you know what happened? Do you know what happened on the day that show was supposed to air?
No.
O.J. Simpson did his Bronco ride down Santa Monica Boulevard. Her show never aired. My book never aired. It aired about several months later. Someone called me up and said, "Maddie, you woke me up last night." I said, "What?" I didn't have it. Come on. He says, "Yeah, I was sleeping. I was sound asleep. At 3:00 in the morning, I heard your voice." Well, it turned out the show was finally aired at 3:00 in the morning.
Oh, that's always helpful.
Yeah, he went to sleep with the TV on, so there it was. So anyhow, thankfully, at that point, I was really, really done. Ed got a job in Vermont, in New Hampshire, and we moved up north from Connecticut there, and my cult days were over. They were really over. I actually was asked to be on TV, the first edition, and my new boss said to me, because we got snowed in New York and I couldn't get back to work. He said, "Listen, you make a decision. It's either cults or vets." I was working at the Vet Center in White River Junction, Vermont, doing psychotherapy for veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. So I had to make a choice. And I had a horse, so I needed to work. So I quit the cult stuff and committed myself to the Vet Center. And it was the best thing I ever did. I love working with those guys and women. They're super. In fact, their stories are in my book. So, my book is divided between my early days, my cult recovery, and the next chapter was 18 years of doing therapy with veterans. And it was wonderful.
And that is so amazing that you've helped so many people. And I think, with the cult aspect of things, this is really, like I said, it's just so important for people to understand, especially when you're delving into the topic of UFOs. In fact, Jacques Vallée wrote a book on Messengers of Deception and on UFO cults and religions and different things. And I think people, anytime you're looking for something like that, you are really susceptible, especially when people have had life-changing experiences like you had that initially brought you into that place where you were looking for that guidance. And can you talk a little bit about some of the warning signs that people can look for?
Well, Erica, when I started working with, I don't know if people know it, but I am on the Experiencer Research team of the Mutual UFO Network. Since 2016, I've been on the team, and our task is to help people who have experienced either abductions or contact with extraterrestrials or UFOs. And in interviewing them and talking with them, I saw uncannily the same type of searching and questioning that I felt in the 70s. So 50 years later, 1975 to 2015, okay? Was that 40 years? Sometimes I can't count. I'm getting very old. So
I hear you on that one. It's just quite special.
Yeah. Okay, so I saw people searching. They have this ontological shock, the same as I did. They discovered a whole new world, one that for many and for most initially is very scary. It can be very scary. One does, and we'll talk about memory loss and that kind of thing, amnesia, whatever. But there's a sense of what happened to me. I don't know. I want to know. And for many, once they have received some counseling or talked to people who are expert in the field, they say, "Oh, I want to know more." From being initially frightened, they now think, "Wow, this was actually very special," especially if they had a healing on board the ship. And I record the story of Deborah, who was healed on a UFO craft, is someone I spoke to in 2015 or 2016, and her story was so moving to me that I used her story in a chapter from Kathleen Martin's book, Extraterrestrial. Gosh, I have every book in front of me. Extraterrestrial Contact: What to Do When You've Been Abducted. I have a chapter on there on coping, and her story is in there. So what happened was, she was abducted, and it was very frightening to her. She remembered it. It wasn't a matter of needing to have hypnosis to remember what happened. She remembered, and she told me about it. And what she told me was that she was taken aboard the craft, and there were these people in cloaks, and she drew them for me. And they were in cloaks, and I recognized them right away because I had encountered a being like that myself when I was quite ill. Without telling her that, I asked her, Deb, were you sick when you were on board the ship? She said, no, I was healthy. She said, but they asked me if I wanted to stay. And I said, no, I don't want to stay. I want to go back to my son. And they said to her, okay. And they let her go back. So I said to Deborah, I said, listen, I'm not going to tell you who I think they are, but I want you to go to this webpage and look at the extraterrestrial beings that were sculpted by Cynthia Crawford. And she looked at it and she says, oh my God, they're Nebulan healers, which is the beings that I wrote about in the book myself when I was 13 and was ill. I saw one by my bed, scared the hell out of me. I said, yes. She said, but I wasn't sick. She said, oh, wait a minute. I was pregnant at the time, and the doctors diagnosed my unborn child as having Down syndrome. In fact, they told me to have an abortion, and I refused. Later on in the pregnancy, they did another test and again said, this child has Down syndrome, you should get abortioned. And she refused. Do you know she delivered a healthy child? Now, can't prove that she was healed, the child was healed on the spaceship, but that's quite a story. And that's one of only many that we hear about healings aboard ships. Okay? I wrote her story. I was so impressed by her story. I did include it in my last book, Dogs, God, and UFOs, as well as another story by two women who were abducted off the porch of their house, or one of their houses. The other was visiting. It was after a high school reunion, and it was one of their birthdays. They were in their mid to late 60s when this event happened in 2014. And one of them took pictures. They didn't come out good, as most pictures taken of ETs or extraterrestrial ships. They usually don't come out that well. But they took pictures, and then they did. But the thing was, they were drinking decaffeinated coffee on the porch that evening. And the next thing they knew, they were on the porch, and their coffee was cold. They didn't have any idea what happened between hot coffee and cold coffee. So they went to bed, and one of them the next day looked at their camera and the photographs on their iPhone and saw these weird things. And that's when they decided, they started having weird feelings, and they both sought hypnotherapists. And that's when the separate hypnotherapy sessions, the memories came up. And they filled out an experience questionnaire on the MUFON website, and I got their case, and I talked to them both. They were very upset, very anxious, very angry when I spoke to them at first. We talked for quite a while. They calmed down, and the end result, I didn't try to convince them of anything, but one of them said to me, I think this has happened many times in my life. I don't remember it, but I think it's happened many times in my life. And the other one said to me, I was really angry, but you know what? Now I'm glad it happened. I learned something that blew my mind, and I'm glad I experienced it. And they were both glad they experienced. The other one said to me, what she felt she learned was that bad things are happening in this world. This was 2014. Bad things are happening, and they sort of tried to warn her and alert her about this, that things had to change on Earth. And they were here to help us. Okay? So there's two very positive incidents of interactions with extraterrestrials. And both of them were in the early days of my work as a volunteer on the Experience Research team.
And I have to ask you, because those are incredible stories, and I've been going through my own journey with digging into things and coming to some conclusions that I wasn't there 5 years ago. And so for me, when I'm looking at the extraterrestrial idea, now I'm stepping back a little bit and saying, wait a minute, maybe that's not necessarily the case. Could there be, man-made technology involved in some of these abductions? And so how does, when you're with your group and you're helping people, is the determination made that something is extraterrestrial?
Oh, great question. Very great question.
Thank you.
The vast majority remember being on ships, and they'll describe the beings on ships. That's not to preclude the fact that some of them, let me put it this way, a couple of them have told me about being told by their fathers who were in the military that their mother's pregnancies were genetically altered by the military hospitals. And that one of them, Cynthia Crawford, was told by a father that she's a hybrid. And by being, meaning that the DNA, her DNA in utero was altered, and alien ET DNA was inserted. So I've heard of that. I've heard of that a few times. Okay.
Could that be because we know, with MK Ultra and different programs that have been initiated and carried out over the decades, that there were pregnant women involved in specific testing, and there were, and so how do we know that it wasn't something like that, and then the alien hybrid thing is being used as a cover story, because that truly is the most brilliant cover story that anyone could think of?
Well, there's no way of proving one way or the other. Barbara Lamb wrote a book, Meet the Hybrids, and I've met two of them, and heard a third one speak, and they're all come from different sources. Their life stories are different. They're not all the same about what has happened to them. But I will say this about the dozen hybrids that she talks about, all of them, and I mean all of them, whether they were my labs, whether they whatever, all of them are very psychic, and all of them are working towards helping better this earth through love, compassion, teaching, being open. And if there are other hybrids or other beings who are just doing the opposite, I haven't met them. Okay? So I'm thinking about someone else who I spoke with not too long ago, whose father was also in the military. And she didn't say she was a hybrid, but she has had experiences on ships. All of these people that Barbara Lamb talked about have experienced being on spacecraft, not abductions, voluntarily being on spacecrafts. And this person told me about her father taking her to a military hospital for recurring checkups. And it's a possibility that she also was experimented on either in childhood or in utero. So, and she was an experiencer as well. So to say one or the other, I don't think that's possible. And I wanted to get into mind control because I think people need to understand what it is. And when we talk about mind control, we need to know that there is a great range of mind control. It's not all the same. It doesn't come from all the same place. So let me go. Let me start from the beginning. All right, because this is how I learned about me, and this is what I wrote about in Kathleen's book, Extraterrestrial Contact, in my chapter on coping, how to cope. And one of the things, because people have had these ontological shocks, encountering ETs or being on a craft, they need to understand how open they are to undue influence, okay? And that word influence is very important. And I learned about influence in big detail in the 80s in reading a book by Robert Cialdini. And I'll be glad, by the way, to send you some of the bibliography for my book and for this. Cialdini wrote about what is influence. And his first book was written in 1982. And it was very helpful for me to understand how we get influenced in every single part of our lives. So you could say that influence is every day. In our lives, we are influenced by a variety of different things. Newspapers, the internet, a stream of information, television, movies, our computers, even games played on the internet and on tablets and phones. Advertisements are inserted, often to our annoyance. We are not immune to a vast, purposeful invasion of our senses, designed to influence how we think, what we wear, what we buy, how we vote. And this is important because what happens is when you watch movies and you see the character, the hero, smoking a cigarette, you want to know what he's smoking. I mean, what brand? At least I was in the 70s, because I was a smoker. I smoked 3 packs a day. You want to know, you notice what brand of beer, you notice what kind of soda they drink, you notice what cars they drive. So these are all ways that marketers influence what we want. We're designed to have our senses immersed, okay? And I'll be the first to admit it, as a smoker for 25 years, 3 packs a day. But I recommend to anybody who wants to look at the influence of that type of persuasion in our everyday life, his book, Influence, is an excellent source of that. And if you want, I can go into what his ingredients are of how, how do cults, how do people use influence to control us, okay? Okay. He said he has 6 principles that describe the tendencies of human behavior that can be used to elicit compliance. Okay, the first one is reciprocity. Okay, the act of give and take. Have you ever had an invitation to a free dinner? All you have to do is listen to a product or a service, a retirement home, an investment opportunity, a home fix-it, or even better, a free trip to Vermont or Maine and look at retirement communities or look at land you can buy. I tell you, my husband and I were big softies. When we first got married, we bought land in Vermont and Maine for vacation homes to invest in. Well, yeah, someone else invested in us, but we had free trips and we got snookered. And in return, I go to every single free invitation for a meal that I can, and I never buy anything. Okay. All right. The next one, because what happens is they give you something, and then you feel like you owe them. Yeah. Or if they're giving you something, wow, what do they have to offer? Let me tell you, it wasn't a good deal. But anyway, the next one is consistency in actions bring about commitment. Once you give or give in, you'll give or give in again. This state sets the stage for greater compliance. It becomes more difficult to say no, especially once your stance becomes public. Donate to a charity, or a political group, you will be forever on the email list. Okay? Or mailing list. Do you know how many calendars I get each year? I get about a dozen calendars each year from all kinds of organizations I've given some money to. No one needs 12 calendars. So that's consistency. They expect you to donate more. If they give you stamps or stickers with your email address or a calendar,
right?
Hopefully you'll write a check for $15, $25 or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. The third is rule of authority. If an expert says it, it must be true. A classic example of this, well, I'm not going to go into the research project Milgram did in college, but I'll tell you this. Look at today's politics, and I'm not going to get political, but who are the authorities you listen to? Do you listen to the mask wearers, or do you listen to the no mask wearers? Two very different. All right? Which authority?
One group has brains and the other doesn't. I don't know.
Oh, I'm not going to get political.
I know. I just had to throw that in there.
Are you going to swallow the Kool-Aid? And the Kool-Aid was from the Jonestown era. That cult that ended up with over 900 people dead in Jonestown in Guyana. All right. So the next thing is, if at any time they involve self-harm or harm to any other being or negative nature, you need to ignore it or counter it. And you do. You have to. Keeping an open mind doesn't mean your brains fall out. And this is something we all need to be aware of. If at any time you see something that's harmful, then you must be aware it's harmful. There's no excuse for it. There's no excuse for causing deliberate harm to another person. If you're in a cult, though, you believe it's for their own good. Okay? So, every day. Okay, that's it. Another one is scarcity induces competition. You value what is rare, not easily available. Its real worth is not necessarily an issue. So think about this. Okay? Something is scarce. Only a few people know the truth. But this person can get you contact with extraterrestrials. This person can help you get on to see a spaceship and become friends with. Or this person actually is a joint alien in a human body. And they know how to bring you to enlightenment. Do you remember the group Heaven's Gate?
Absolutely.
Okay. Marshall Whitworth said 39 people committed suicide because they believed that when the comet Hale-Bopp came over, there was going to be a spaceship that will take people to the next level. Now, prior to this was a very committed group of people. All the men were castrated, volunteered for castration, as, helps them be perfect. They won't have any sexual desire. They're castrated. When they died, they were in bunks. They all dressed the same way, with Nike shoes, with plastic bags over their head. There was 39 of them, believing that after the comet passed, they would be taken somewhere where they will become enlightenment.
And you know what, I want to just throw in there, because this is such an important thing, and people don't realize that, they took their cueing from Art Bell and a remote viewer, Courtney Brown. And there was very little, if any, remorse shown. And so it is really important that people understand that when you're saying things, especially to people who are searching for the answers for experiences that they've had, that you have a responsibility to understand that there might be somebody out there that is not in the best of mental health.
Right. Now, you mentioned Courtney Brown. What I was unfamiliar with his role in that. What was his role?
So he was on Art Bell's show, and they were both talking about the comet and the UFO and all sorts of things. And there's some articles out there about that whole thing, and it was really sad, and it's a good lesson for all of us for multiple reasons, and I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, because he's still being influential right now in his teaching in the Farsight Institute, which I have become familiar with. So here's someone who's still active in the field, stating a knowledge of extraterrestrials, because you have to now buy into his premium channel in order to find out what his remote viewers are seeing. I have not seen it. Yeah. And I used to follow his monthly readings because he'd have his remote viewers predict what's going to happen the next month. I can't tell you, after a few months of them failing to see some very important events, I said, oh, yeah, they're not very good at all. I remember it was like, you didn't see the explosion in Beirut? What's the matter with your vision in the future? It's like, okay. So in any case, but yes, we tend to trust authorities. If they get one thing right, then we ignore all the things they're wrong about. That's very important. So the leader or the person who's leading this exposition of truth does not have to be 100%. He has to be correct about one thing that's important to you. The rest can be bullshit.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So you want to take a look at the leaders? I think that is one of the most, who leads these groups is really.
Yes.
All right. Let me get to that because, oh my gosh. Okay. I'm not going to use my book, but I have so many books here, but I have a list of who these lead are. First of all, they have been described as malignant narcissists or psychopaths, sociopaths. A psychopath is not necessarily crazy. They're people with antisocial personality disorder who then get to use that lack of empathy, that lack of caring to enrich themselves and harm others. Okay? And I don't know, do you want to take a break for
You know what? We're gonna go for about 10 more minutes, and then we can take a break, and then you can, go grab a glass of water.
Okay. All right. But before I get to the psychopath, which is one of my favorite subjects because I had to understand it, I want to tell you what a cult is.
Thank you. This is awesome, and I really am enjoying this conversation. So thank you for doing that. It's important to me. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things about experiences and people today, which is so much like myself 40 years ago, is a desire for answers. Why is it happening? What does climate change? How are we going to survive the climate? How are we going to survive the pandemic, the political, whatever? There's a need for answers, for absolute answers. And for people who've experienced contact phenomena, they feel, rightly so, very special. I'm not saying they shouldn't feel special at all, because I've had contact phenomena. And that is not shared into the last chapter of my book. My own involvement with ufology, with guides, with the beings that have assisted me in life and now. And there's a need for those people who are having some experience to have answers. What does it mean? Why are they contacting me? And they become impatient. They may get hints of some things to come in this world. You don't need an extraterrestrial intelligence to tell you that our world's going down the tubes. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is read the paper and you'll know about climate change and, all the species that are lost on a daily basis.
No, it's heartbreaking.
Sad. Or the fact that in large parts of the world, millions, and I mean millions of people, are starving. There's drought in large portions of Africa and Asia. And on the other hand, in other parts of Asia, there's humongous flooding. So we're looking at a world, an earth, that is wildly out of balance. And here it is, November 12th, and I'm in Virginia, and it's warm. It was in the 70s for the past 2 weeks. That has never been my experience.
Wow.
Yeah, it's hot. It's warm. I'm not putting the air conditioning on, but let me tell you, November for 70s?
Right.
Yeah. So, you need to be aware of the charismatic people who I'll get into after our break. Who are these cult leaders? And we need to protect ourselves. And we need to look at groups, people, ideas, products, and services with some discernment. Whether you're choosing which courses to take in college, which psychic to consult, or which UFO conference to go to, it's up to the individual to do some research. What are the pros and cons? Who endorses them? Who opposes or disdains them? Gather as much information as you can before your commitment. If you have any niggling thoughts or doubts, if your gut says, uh-oh, I don't know if I should do this, that is the final reality. Not what people, your gut says, uh-oh, I need to be cautious or slow down. Listen to it. You have
that
to
is so
listen.
important. In fact, I want to just mention there is a really great book, and I need to reread it, called The Gift of Fear.
Oh,
and that was
that sounds good.
It was really, really, it was excellent, and that it is so important that sometimes we just don't listen to our instincts. And
well, tell me about it.
You know what? I will have to, on the break, I'll run and see if I can grab it, and then I'll read a little bit of it, because it's it teaches you how to trust your instincts and how to, it gives different situations where people have been in a situation that might not have worked out for them, and they listen to their instinct, and it's really good book, especially I think for a lot of young women, and I mean that's something else I want to talk to you about when we get back from break, are some of the women that are coming into the UFO field, and could they be susceptible to some type of, to the same types of being taken advantage of by these cultish figures and things. There's so many interesting things to talk about with you.
Gosh, this is just a beginning. And I tell you, Erica, I never dreamt that I'd be revisiting this topic so long after my cult involvement. It is so relevant today, just as it was then. There's right now a cult centered mostly in Europe that has hundreds of thousands of members. And the leader says he is God. And it's a sex cult. The women are used as sex slaves. It's incredible. This is still going on. In fact, there was a cult in the United States, NXIVM. I might be pronouncing it wrong. And the leader was just prosecuted.
Yes.
He's going to jail.
Yep.
Okay.
And he was branding women.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So here you're thinking, how can a woman be branded? How stupid can you get? Well, you know what? It's not stupidity. It's really the clever use of influence and mind control techniques. And we'll get to them.
Oh, I
we'll
love
get to
this.
who the leader is and what he does.
I mean, I don't love this. Let me rephrase that. But
I want to rephrase that, don't you? Okay. I'll let you do that.
No, but this is just so important. And I always try to, I'm learning new things, and I want to educate the public about things like that, especially people who are turning to ufology, because, like I said, we can fall into a lot of traps if we're not careful. And so this is good information that you're giving us. Mm-hmm. And on that note, we're gonna take a little break, but I want to just give a shout out to all of my listeners, all of the people that are supporting my show and sending me messages. I really, I do this for you. I love being here on Friday nights. I love seeing my friends in chat, and I really love it when my computer doesn't take a dive and when I unmute the microphone. Yay!
I will say this, Erica. We talked for well over an hour last week. And these were topics that I hadn't thought about in a long time. So at least this time gave me an opportunity to say, oh, boy, I better dig out my old books and see what the heck I said 50 years ago.
I love it. I'm so glad you did. This is so cool. And I want to just Mady, thank you so much for being here. You are such a fascinating woman with a lot of different life experiences. And
we haven't gotten into any of those, Erica.
I know. Absolutely. But we'll take a break, and then I will be posting books or links to your book, Dogs, God, and UFOs. And I'm just really excited. So we'll be right back after the break.
Okay.
All right, that was Lauren Cutts, who has been on my show before. I think he is an incredible musician, and I love that song. It's a nice little pick-me-up on on a cold and stormy day here in Utah. This is a pre-recorded interview with Mady Tobias, who tried to come on last week, but unfortunately my computer was a little under the weather, and so things did not align. Now, I was mentioning in chat room just a minute ago that I was reading an article in UFO magazine, Transforming Consciousness, how Dr. John Mack is changing the face of abduction research. And in this, Richard Hall, formerly with NICAP, wrote a very critical editorial about Dr. John Mack and how he felt that Mack was leading people into dangerous, ungrounded territory. It is a fascinating article, and so if you can find that online, it is definitely worth a read. But there were people back during that time frame that were sounding the alarms, specifically on abduction research and things, and it is something to be mindful of, to be cautious of, especially you need to ask questions when you have data, when people are coming into groups and doing group hypnosis or having people fill out questionnaires. Where is that data going, and who is looking at it, and for what ends? And I think these are really critical questions to be asking, because as we know, sometimes people aren't doing things for our greater good, and this is especially true, I believe, in the UFO community. So now I am joined again with Mady. We did this interview yesterday for part 2 of her interview, so I will get that going. And thanks to Lauren for the wonderful music. And make sure also that you get in Spreaker and like and follow my show. All right, there you go. Here's part 2. I want to welcome Mady Tobias back to the show. It's such a pleasure to have her here. And last week, as my wonderful listeners know, there was, something was rotten in Denmark, or at least on the computer front. But we are here now, and having the week between our conversation that you unfortunately didn't get to hear last week, and now the conversation that we're having today, it just seems like both of us have looked into things. As you mentioned, you got your books out and started thinking about remembering all the things that you learned a few decades back. And I think this is a really important conversation, and it's just a real pleasure to have you here, telling our listening audience about some of the things to be aware of when it comes to mind control or cult-like figures who try to influence us, and oftentimes not for our greater good. So thank you so much. And you wrote, and is your book Captive Hearts, Captive Minds, and Take Back
Still
Your Life?
available?
Yes, are they still available?
No. Captive Hearts, Captive Minds is out of print.
Okay.
And Yanya Lalich, my co-author, and I rewrote the book. She did most of the work on that, I have to say, on the rewrite. And that book is Take Back Your Life, and that is still available. Okay. And for anybody who's been in a cultic environment, perhaps we should talk about what a cult is before we talk about I don't know. We're getting to my very favorite subject, and that's talking about those psychopaths, all right? Plus, it was a way of getting even somehow. When I got involved in the Cult Awareness Network, I was asked to speak at their international meetings. And every year, the Cult Awareness Network, which eventually got sued out of existence by the Church of Scientology, by the way, it's no longer in existence. However, the other organization, which has taken over the research part as well as the assistance part for ex-members, is the International Cultic Studies Association. Incredible organization, ixahome.org, and I'll give you that website for anybody who has questions about what we're talking about. So anyway, my first opportunity to speak at a conference was like in 1988 or 89, and I gave a talk on the profile of a cult leader. And I want you to listen to this, not so much thinking about, a psychopath or a cult leader, but who do you know who fits these descriptions, okay? Some people call them malignant narcissists, okay? But a cult leader is a charismatic person. They have a certain charm. Now, charisma is not bad in itself. Think about your favorite movie star, or if there's any religious leader that you truly admire, like Gandhi, the Buddha, Jesus. But they become an object of worship, these cult leaders. And what we'll get into is how do they use mind control? Because that will take us into another subject entirely. What is mind control? Who does it? And that's a much broader subject. All right. So the first, now what I'm going to talk to you about is this checklist, the psychopathy checklist, was done first by Hervey, Cleckley, and Robert Hare. And I read their books with keen interest. So here is the first one. There's like, let me see, 15 hallmarks. Okay, the first one is glibness, superficial charm. This is a hallmark. They could talk about anything forever. They're able to use language effortlessly to confuse, beguile, and convince. They're captivating storytellers. They exude self-confidence and are able to spin a web that intrigues others and pulls them into their life. Okay? Most of all, they're persuasive. Frequently, they have capacity to destroy. Listen to this one. I have to admit, I'm reading this to you. Frequently, they have the capacity to destroy their critics verbally or disarm them emotionally. Mm-hmm. Okay? Next one is they're manipulative and conning. They do not recognize the rights of others, which is a hallmark of all their self-serving behaviors and makes that permissible. The psychopath divides the world into suckers, sinners, and himself. He discharges powerful feelings of terror and rage by dominating and humiliating his victims. Do we know anybody who does that?
Mm-hmm. Several people come to mind.
Okay. Third, they have a grandiose sense of self. They enjoy tremendous feelings of entitlement. They believe that everything is owed to them as a right, and they're preoccupied with their own fantasies, and they must always be the center of attention. Okay? Paranoia often accompanies this grandiosity, and it creates an us versus them mentality. The fourth is pathological lying. Psychopaths or sociopaths or whatever you want to call them, they lie coolly and easily, even when it's obvious they're not being truthful. It's impossible, almost impossible for them to be consistently truthful about either a major or a minor issue. They lie for no apparent reason, even when it would be easier and safer to tell the truth. Okay? 5, lack of remorse, shame, or guilt. And you have to understand, at the core of these people is a deep-seated rage. Whatever is caused by childhood upbringing, genetics, or whatever, they see those around them as objects, targets, or opportunities, not as people. They don't have friends, real friends. They have victims and accomplices, and the latter frequently end up as victims. Okay? Next, shallow emotions. Well, they may have display outbursts of emotions. More often than not, they're putting on a calculated response to obtain a certain result. Mm-hmm. They rarely feel a range of emotions, and what is seen is superficial at best. Positive feelings of warmth, joy, love, and compassion are faked rather than experienced. They are unmoved by things that would upset the normal person, while outraged by insignificant matters. Next, 7, incapacity for love. Even if they talk about being God or a follower of God, the leader is tragically flawed in being unable to either give or receive love. Love substitutes are given instead. A typical example of this, and I believed it too. The guru may state that he is taking your suffering upon himself, that his illness or misfortune, because of his enlightened state and his compassion for you, is caused by the depth of compassion for you or others.
Wow.
So he's taking on your negative
That's
karma
very
for you.
kind.
Isn't that nice? Isn't that wonderful?
God.
Oh, God. Next, need for stimulation. Thrill-seeking behaviors. I know I don't have long to live, therefore my time on earth must be lived to the fullest. I'm going to get everything I can out of every day of my life. This type of behavior becomes more frequent as the leader deteriorates emotionally and psychologically. Common occurrence. They go downhill. They live on the edge, constantly testing the beliefs of their followers, often with increasingly bizarre behaviors, punishments, and rules. Next. This is what I found so hard to believe. Callousness, lack of empathy. They take advantage of others, expressing utter contempt for anyone else's feelings. Someone in distress is not important to them. Think about that. How often have you seen that? Mm-hmm. Whether a person is incapacitated or ill or handicapped, they show absolutely no sense of care or empathy. Next, poor behavioral controls. They have impulsive natures, like small children. Many psychopaths have difficulty regulating their emotions. Adults who have temper tantrums are frightening to be around. Rage and abuse, alternating with token expressions of love and approval, produce an addictive cycle for both the abuser and the abused, as well as create a sense of hopelessness in the latter. Next, early behavior problems, juvenile delinquency. We don't often know about that. I do know of my own cult leader that he got into trouble in high school, and he was offered the chance of jail or Vietnam. Okay, or jail in the Army, I should say. He actually did not go to Vietnam, though he told me that he did. So we don't know about, if they're if they come from a wealthy family, there's other ways of skirting that bad behavior. Go to military school or do something, whatever. Next, irresponsibility and unreliability. They are not concerned with the consequences of their behavior and will leave behind them the wreckage of others' lives and dreams. Yeah. They may be totally oblivious or indifferent to the devastation they inflict on others, something which they regard as neither their problem nor their responsibility. And they don't accept blame or responsibility for their failures or mistakes. I think the next one's interesting. Promiscuous sexual behavior and infidelity. That's common with sociopaths. Promiscuity, child sexual abuse, polygamy, rape, and sexual acting out of all sorts are frequently practiced by sociopaths, psychopaths, antisocial personality disorders, cult leaders.
And I just have to say, right there, I'm thinking of some of these people in the yoga world. How
yes.
They have just, they're definitely sexual addicts and abuse people like that. It's interesting.
Yes, Eastern religions were along with all other religions, not just Eastern, but full of sexual abuse, whether Hindu, Buddhist, or whatever, as well as Christian, Jewish, whatever. All leaders, all groups have the capacity to produce a psychopath who will take over and abuse. And in spiritual groups, that's especially painful when the person who goes to them for spiritual health is then abused. Mm-hmm. And it produces a sense of complete loss of faith, loss of belief, loss of everything. The next is lack of realistic life plan or a parasitic lifestyle. And that was typically with my cult leader, because he was a parasite. His clients became, they were source of investments and source of money, sex, power, whatever. And he flipped around. He had well, in the 10 years that I knew him, he had 4 or 5 different careers, whether it was in psychotherapy, being a social worker, or being a marketer of this or that, real estate developer, real estate salesman, mortgage person, whatever. And the last one is criminal or entrepreneurial versatility. You're laughing. Why are you laughing, Erica?
I don't know, just to hear those together, that just made me smile.
Why did you laugh? They changed their image, and now the group is needed to avoid prosecution and litigation, to increase income, and to recruit a range of members. They could, they will lie, cheat, and steal. They don't pay their bills. They get other people to pay their bills. Well, they just leave the debt. I don't know that. That's not right. I don't care about that. Screw them. So those are the characteristics of a cult leader. Not funny.
Charming.
It's not.
But I mean, it isn't. But it's I mean, you just when you are mentioning that and reading those attributes, it's just you can. I mean, I see different people kind of flashing in my mind, especially with regard to some of the people in the UFO world. And so, again, that's why I think it's so important that you're talking about this, so we can look at that from that perspective and stay safe and healthy.
Yeah, right. It's interesting that I gave that talk a couple of times, and I wrote about it in my book, the first book, Captive Hearts, Captive Minds. It's also in the second book. But one of the things that I thought was extremely funny, it's not funny now to me, but the year after I gave that talk about the psychopathology of the cult leader, Louis Jolyon West. Is that a name familiar to you by any chance?
Jolly West? In fact, I just read that name last night. And
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
He was very active in the Cult Awareness Network. Oh. And he gave the same talk that I gave the following year. Word for word, it seemed.
Isn't that?
Yes, Jolly West. Yes.
MK
Ultra.
Yes, MK
Mr.
Ultra.
MK Ultra.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I didn't know that at the time. None of us knew that at the time. That information came out later.
That is really saying something, isn't it? That's incredible.
Right. So I guess you should define what a cult is. You'd think I would know this by heart. And I do, but my mind is just reeling now with all these things from the past, from the present, and from the future. But a cult, let me give you the definition. A cult is defined as a group or movement exhibiting great or excessive devotion to a person, idea, or thing. According to ICSA, the International Cultic Studies Association, the executive director, Michael Langone, is a good friend, nice person. He wrote a paragraph for me on the front of Dog Scouting and UFOs. He describes 3 characteristics of a cult, which may present to a greater or lesser degree. And this distinguishes cults from other communities or groups. 1, members are expected to be excessively zealous and unquestioning in their commitment to the identity and leadership of the group. Members are manipulated and exploited, sometimes giving up families, careers, and education to work for the group. And 3rd, harm or threat of harm may come to members due to inadequate medical care, abuse. And the abuse may be physical, psychological, or sexual. That's a cult. Okay. So what are the tech? Yeah. Questions?
Yeah, I mean, my mind is going a million miles a minute, and
yeah. So, what do cults do? How do they get control of people? And when I first looked at this now for the books that I contributed for Kathleen's book, I had to think, how do people who, let's take one small segment now, all right? And take a step backward. And let's take a look at consciousness for a moment. The state of consciousness can be defined in so many different ways. It could be stated as the fact of being conscious or aware of an external object or state. It could be defined as the quality of our life as we see, hear, feel, and think. What we're aware of outside and to some limited extent within us. Now, that only looks at two states of consciousness, the awaking state. There are many other states of consciousness. And our senses more or less are alert to what we see, hear, or physically feel when we're awake. We can also sense temperature, pain, hunger, and thirst. But in an altered state of consciousness, some or all of these can be blocked or changed. That's an important part. Normally, we go through many states of consciousness every day. And when we leave the alert, awake state, we're not always aware of what is totally going on. Let me give you an example. Have you read a good book or watched a movie that was so engrossing, I don't know how you want to pronounce it, depending whether you're from New York. That you're so involved in it, you don't hear anything else, you're not aware of anything else. And then when someone taps you on the shoulder, you jump because you're so involved. That's because your focus is so narrow to what is most interesting. Okay? Now, other states of consciousness include sleep. There are many stages of sleep. Deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep. When you listen to music and you really love what you're listening to, or you're meditating, or you've been hypnotized, we can go into a lot about hypnosis. That's another subject altogether. Under anesthesia, coma, pharmacological use such as marijuana, cocaine, LSD, opiates, alcohol. Near-death experiences are an altered state of consciousness. And physiological states caused by physical trauma to the brain, such as infections or encephalitis, meningitis, oxygen deficiency, epilepsy, spiritual experiences. Those are all altered states of consciousness. Now, what do they have in common? First of all, we all go through them. We all go through them. Well, we don't all go through near-death experiences, but some people leave their bodies. Some people do astral travel. I haven't been able to do that. I have to be honest with you. I have tried. I've read every single thing I could about astral projection. I failed. What can I tell you?
Well, at least you gave it a try.
I gave it a try, but you know what I did do? In the 70s, I read about remote viewing, and I had some success until my cult leader told me to stop because I saw him with a woman, and I described what I was seeing. He said, "Don't you ever do that again." So, of course, I never did that again. Gouch, right? So what I'm looking at are my notes. Erica, where were I going with this? Because I have in front of me a dozen books with markers.
Well, I think, that you're on a great path because you're, explaining to us what to look out for, what the characteristics are of a psychopath and a cult leader, and making all of us just question a little bit more some of the things that maybe we've been told in the past by different people or groups, which is really important for somebody who is getting into the UFO subject.
Yes. And in the 70s and 80s, when the cult explosion became apparent in the media, when the Moonies, the Unification Church, and other groups, and Jonestown with their 900 plus dead came into being, people would say to me, "How can you join a cult? What's the matter with you? You stupid? Well, you know what? There's a cult for everyone. There are all kinds of cults. And you can have a cult, a religious cult. You can have a book cult. You can have a large group awareness cult like EST. Remember EST in the 70s, 80s?
No, I don't.
Oh, EST, EST. It was one of the large group awareness trainings where people would learn how to be better. And they told you how to think and feel. There are religious cults, non-religious cults. There are martial arts cults. Mm-hmm. Any subject, if it has the right or the wrong kind of leader, can make it into a cult. So you can have a cult on any topic. It could be a dance group that's a cult. So let's take a look on what is needed to make it a cult. First of all, you need that sociopathic leader, that narcissistic leader, who wants to attract attention so that he can have his needs or her needs met. There are women who have cults too. So the researchers who started looking at cults described the three Ds: dependency, deception, and dread as important. That's instilled in the follower. Deception, we already talked about. We talked about influence and persuasion. And the hallmark of a cult is its use of deception in the recruitment process and throughout membership. Cults use meditation classes, computer schools, health clinics, telemarketing programs, publishing enterprises, business seminars, real estate ventures, Bible study groups, political science groups, campus activity groups as front organization to lure potential new members into the recruitment web. And they're not honest. They're not telling people what they're getting into. They're selling an ideal that appeals to a specific group. Everybody has desires or wants to learn more or wants to find companionship, power. The prospective person who is wooed with the promise of reward could be wooed with a lot of things, be it personal fulfillment, special knowledge, spiritual growth, political satisfaction, religious salvation, riches, power. Whatever is most dear to that person will be drawn to that specific cult. So wealth, power, you don't think of those as spiritual desires. They're not. However, there's a cult for you if that's what you want. Mm-hmm. The next stage is dependency. You've been drawn into it in the recruitment stage. And that first beginning of the group is the honeymoon phase. Frequently, as a teaser, one of the recruit's wishes may be granted. Once that favor is granted, the potential recruit is made to even feel more indebted to the group. Remember Cialdini's example of reciprocity. And here's where it gets thick and deep. As you become more interested and somewhat dependent upon the group, you may be urged to confess your deepest secrets, weaknesses, and fears, and open yourself up as the cult leadership probes for more knowledge about you. All right? Each member, each prospective disciple is carefully paced through a conversion process. Now, there are many different kinds of coercion processes, okay? Psychological coercion increases with the intensified use of meditation, chanting, long prayer sessions, hypnosis, sleep deprivation, and other mind-altering techniques of manipulation and control. Each group uses something different. And I'm not going to get into the history of mind control and brainwashing and that's a big subject for another day. There are books that we can include. I think you have, or I'll send you my bibliography, and people can look at things if they're interested in exploring further. But the last D is dread. And this is what keeps you in. The cult insinuates a feeling of dread in the recruit's mind, which further isolates the members and prevents defections. And this is by increasing the dependency on the group and on the leader through its escalated demands, intensified criticism and humiliation. This is not fun stuff. Once you get in deep, you are totally dependent upon the group and the leader, and they use that, subtly or not so subtly. Threats of punishment, which may be physical, spiritual, emotional, or sexual. Even small children can be held responsible for even small infractions. And then the threat of excommunication, shunning, and abandonment by the group become powerful forces of control once members become fully dependent on the group. All right? If you leave, you're doomed. You will have countless cycles of reincarnation. You will never find God. You are spiritually dead. All those things. And people leave and they feel incredibly hopeless and helpless. And the way to get out of a cult, sometimes the leader dies and someone else steps up and you're just the same thing. Sometimes the leader leaves or dies, like in my case, and one can say, oh, thank God I'm free. Or in the 70s and 80s, they had groups of exit counselors that helped families get a member out of the cult. And they did this by educating the family and then spending time with the family and the member together. And it was, I say we because I participated in exit counseling of several people from different cultic groups. There was a core group of us exit counselors, and I was very delighted to become a member of teams where they wanted a mental health person there. So I became familiar with the use of education to help people make a decision to leave the group with their family's support. So that's another topic all by itself. How are we doing, Erica?
You know what? I mean, there's so many things that are coming to mind, and I look back at some of the interesting experiences I've had in my time in the public UFO world, and it is interesting, to note. And there are, you mentioned a specific organization earlier that is very hardcore, especially if somebody dissents or tries to leave the organization. And there are specific guidelines that have been put forward. You can find them on the internet where they talk about the things that they will do to a person that is leaving.
Yes.
And I mean, they have organized groups of people that follow individuals that harass, that blackmail, they mount a public campaign, a smear campaign against these people. And I'm reminded of some of the behavior in ufology, and it is my thought in that sense that there are little factions that are up to that kind of behavior and things. And so it really is interesting to look at all of this and then correlate it with what we see. And you mentioned earlier too, being mindful when you go to specific conferences. And in my time speaking at different conferences, it has raised a little bit of alarm in me to go and see some of the ideas being put forth that have nothing to do with education and nothing to do with researching a phenomenon. It has to do with melding your mind into a political process or a religious, kind of whacked out religious idea. And it's all under this guise that we're so new agey and wow, we've got the answers and we're communing with extraterrestrials, and some of that you just have to step back and go, whoa, wait a minute.
You reminded me of a song that captured my imagination in the 70s, and I think it's as suitable now, and if you don't mind, I'll play a bit of it.
Yeah.
Enough of the Starship. But I was thinking about that song because it seemed to be so coincident when I had breakthroughs in something. But that's a song of the 70s, the song that, we were all hoping for miracles. And that's today, too. It hasn't changed at all. We're all hoping for miracles. And that's part of the divide in ufology, that some believe the ETs, the non-human intelligence, are bad, and some are good, and which ones are which, and how do you tell the difference, and this and that. And I'll say this very simply. As above, so below. On this earth, there's greed, anger, jealousy, pride, envy, anger, hatred, racism. Is also on the other side of it, love, compassion, caring. They're not so much opposites, because if you look at the two extremes, so we all have a little bit in between as well. No one is free from the negative completely. As we grow and mature as individuals and life happens to us, we all go through those things. And then we come out of it stronger or weaker on one side or the other. The same above. Whether you talk about the universe or the galaxy, the yin and the yang, there's both of them. Which one do you want to side with? Which one do you want to be a part of? Which one, not even being a part of it, but which one do you want to live as a human being? And we all make choices. We make choices, even in my own family, of whether service to others is more important than self-advancement or greed or power or whatever. We all make choices about what's important to us. And then we have to take responsibility for what happens with our choices. You just heard my philosophy of life.
I love it. That was a nice philosophy. I really, really like that. Yeah. And I have to ask, you, because we've touched on, some darker topics, but important topics today that have a lot of influence in the world of UFOs. And I want to talk a little bit about experiencers or abductees, or however. And would there be some benefit if you had a group of people that were continuing the MK Ultra along those lines to get in and monitor people who are reporting these experiences, and what would the benefit be? And that is, I know, that's dark and deep, and I'm sorry, but I know, I'm so sorry. But I've mentioned, I've been unfortunately, going down this interesting path, and it all started really going in that direction when I started learning more about Skinwalker Ranch and some of the goings-ons, and then really looking into abductions and the different people who popped up at specific points who were funded by specific individuals. And so it's made me a little more cautious and wanting to know how, where are the checks and balances, and how do we know that if somebody is part of an abduction, group or experience or study, that all the information is going to a safe place. I mean, you know what I mean? I have a lot of questions about that now.
Hold on a second. I mean, what do we do on the ERT with the information we get?
That would be great. But do you also think, and my initial thought or question was, do you think that some of these groups could potentially be opening themselves up to people that are taking advantage of that for nasty purposes?
Oh, you get to the point of trust, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that. I know the people I work with, the experiences that I talk to, want to know more. The experiencer group that meets monthly that I lead, These people are trying to understand their experiences. I don't encourage or work with anybody who has been a part of any military or government type of thing. Not at all. In fact, they don't come. They don't come forward. At least they haven't to me. So I don't really know about that. And the few times that people have mentioned to me that there may be government involved, I don't ever hear from them again. Truly. That's something to think about.
That's curious, that's interesting. And do you, have you, in your work with MUFON and the ERT, have you ever, with the other people that you're working with, have you dialogued about that potential that there could be something earthly that is behind some of these abductions?
We don't really talk about that. At least it would be a private conversation between some members. But I've not been a part of any of that. Because we're now talking about things we really cannot explore. There's no way and no desire for us to find out more about that. That to me, it has not been an issue. The purpose of the Experience of Research team, which is really kind of separate from MUFON in many ways, is people fill out a 30-question questionnaire. And then then George Medic, Dr. Medic, sends it out to the ERT member who's nearest in location to that person. When I joined in 2016, there was only a half a dozen of us ERT members. Now there's almost 40. Okay? Today, there's almost 40 people in the United States, Canada, and Europe. And what we do is we contact the person who fills out that questionnaire and ask them if they want to talk about it with someone who has some understanding of some of the issues. And what I hope to do is help the people deal with stuff that is scary, uncomfortable, confusing, and help them to give them the resources, the books, the internet sites that would best help them deal with what they have, to normalize an abnormal situation, because it's a shock. And many of them do not have full memories of what happened. They have pieces of it. They may wake up in the bed and find their clothes are on backwards, or there's marks on their body. And they have pieces of memories that they can't make any sense of. And we have a list of hypnotherapists on the MUFON list who we vetted, who are licensed. And we give them a choice of, if they wish, we don't urge it, to contact one of the people on the list. We do not necessarily follow up and want to know what happened, though we tell them. We'll be glad to assist them once they have received a regression, if they wish. And that's it. We're here to give assistance more than any other thing. The next thing is, every few years we do a research project where we look at how many people actually respond to our invitation to talk. We send out an opening email saying, "Hi, we received your questionnaire. You responded 10 out of 30 questions with yes. And I'm here to help you make sense of it, or send you information, or give you resources you could follow up on." For some people, well, I get high percentages of people who at least will write back to me. And when they write back, they tell me a little bit about themselves, and I ask them if they would like to talk. And let's say lately, I'd say 75% of people, well, maybe more than that, 80% of people respond to my email, and about, I would say maybe 80% of them I'll have at least one discussion with. And some of them will join my experiencer group. And it's all for support. So George will send out, I want to know how many people responded to your email? How many people did you talk to? What would be your opinion about how valid their experiences were? Was it a narrative of childhood events that occurred throughout their lives? Was it memories that are achieved through hypnosis? Was it substantial in the fact that there were pictures of body markings or pictures that they've taken that were valid, or anything that substantiates the fact of contact? Not what it was, not who it was. That never gets sent to him. He just wants to know what the percentages are. And every person on the ERT keeps their information about individual people confidential. No one gets that material. Lock and key.
And so, and you had mentioned when we were talking last time, and this is really good to know, but you had mentioned that the database for people that are submitting things is completely separate from the MUFON database.
Right. Exactly. There is a difference. If the person has a sighting of a UFO or reports the contact directly to the MUFON computer database, it gets a CMS number, and the information that they report is on the CMS database. The ERT member hopefully will be then contacted. Not every state will send the information or get an ERT member to follow up. Hopefully they will. And then we interview the person who made the report. And I will tell you this, I do not put much information into the database, the CMS database. To me, as a psychotherapist, there's HIPAA regulations of privacy. And what they reveal to me is very private stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree, and that is good to know that there's a separate database and things. And I want to ask you, how many submissions or reports are you guys seeing in a month, and is that increasing, decreasing?
That's a good question. It varies so much. Some years we get a height of 1,300 experiencer questionnaires a year. 1,300, 1,400. I believe it's less. I think it's about 1,000. But I do not know the current number.
Okay. And that would be interesting to know. Yeah, that's... Yes. And with 40 people on our team, I certainly get less questionnaires. If they happen to live within the states around, where I live, then I'll get the questionnaires. And so have you seen a decrease in the amount of cases where there is a suspected implant? Or is that something that's still kind of a common theme?
It is a common theme, but it's something that can't be proven, because no one is going to say, oh, send it to me or this or that. There are commonly people report that they have a lump or bump in a certain place in their nose or in their leg or whatever, which they suspect is an implant. And who's going to take it out? Is it covered by your insurance? Medicare? I don't think so. Unless you tell your doctor, this bump bothers me, it ain't going to be removed. Okay? Now, there used to be, there's a book by Lear. I forgot his first name.
Roger.
Okay. Yeah, and he did study the implants. But he passed away. And now there is a procedure if someone does have an implant removed, that it could be sent to, but not to our labs. It's a really iffy thing. And the other thing they find out is when an implant is removed, after a certain time, if it's not kept in plasma, it will dissolve. So what is the purpose of an implant? I don't know. There's a lot of theories, but I'm not sure. Is it a tracking device? Well, you know what? I don't know. I really don't know.
And
So
I have to say, and it's interesting because I was looking at, all of you that are on, and you're right. Wow, the experiencer team has certainly grown from, when I was a part of that for a brief period of time back before, when I was in MUFON. But I want to say I was looking at Dr. Medic's biography. And in it, it says that he participated in MUFON's anomalous foreign body removal protocol team. Mm-hmm. And that sounds interesting.
But you know what? There is a protocol, but not often can a person afford to have it removed unless it's medically necessary and the insurance covers it. So I'm sure that there's information there. I just don't have that.
It's also fascinating, and with regard to some of the experiences people are sharing with you, are there specific types of entities that they are seeing? I mean, we know the classic grays. What are some of the things that you're seeing now, and has that changed over time?
Well, if you think about it, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of different extraterrestrials that interact with us. Some have teams that have different members. The small grays are sort of robotic-like, and they follow commands. They don't have much emotional content to them, if at all. And there are others behind them who issue them instructions, and they do the work, or they help carry out the work on the ships. We hear about Nordics, tall whites. We hear about avians. We hear about mantids. And there are many others, as well as tall grays.
And, I just have to go back because you mentioned the tall whites, and I find it interesting.
The Nordics.
When you go back and you think of, when the Nordic stuff was kind of inserted into the narrative and by whom, and people, then you look at perhaps maybe the influence in, the superior race, quote unquote.
Wait a second. Are you saying that the tall Nordics are a superior race?
No, I'm not. No, but I'm saying that people say that, and it is interesting that they are blonde-haired and blue-eyed.
Well, that just, what makes you think that we are so unique in the universe? And who made us? Who made us? If you think about it, the universe is billions of years old, and some of these planetary systems are millions years older than us. And who populated the Earth? Who seeded the Earth? Who helped us grow and advance as a civilization, from the apes to the hominids to the Denisovans to the Neanderthal to the whatever? Did we have some help along the way? Some genetic help? In any case, I don't know the answer to that. But when you look at humanity as a species, there may be other similar species throughout the universe. And the tall whites may be one. And simply because they look like us, who knows? They're certainly more advanced if they're on a spaceship traveling throughout the universe. The other thing is, we're talking now about ships. And what are the ships made of? Are they made of hard material? Some people describe ships that are alive. The ship itself is alive. It's a living being dedicated to serving, to doing its job. Many other people who report contact with extraterrestrials report extraterrestrials that are interdimensional, that are of higher dimensions, much higher dimensions, meaning advanced spiritually, not just advanced mechanically or intellectually, but advanced spiritually, that are interacting with us. Some that take form and some that don't. Some that take form and then not take form. In my book, I have lots of angel stories in the book.
And I'm going to have you back because some of the, just, obviously we talked about that last time, which nobody, could hear. But
That's right. We talked about angels
Yes, but you do have some very interesting stories about that, and that brings up in my mind just a kind of a closing question. But how do we know the difference? Is this interdimensional? Is this, Grandma Moses coming back from the dead to say hello? Is this, a ET? How do we know where one line, where the line is drawn and one type of thing occurs and the other, leaves off?
Oh boy, that's a good one. In my belief system, from what I've read and from what I've experienced, there are many levels of dimensions, and each level, as you get higher, has different entities that could travel back and forth. When you talk about ghosts, I think of beings who've passed, who died, who've not gone on to higher dimensions. They're stuck here. In fact, annually, I go with a group to Gettysburg, and we have a prayer group and appeal to those soldiers who don't even know they're dead. They're still walking the grounds of Gettysburg, and people have seen them. I haven't seen them. But I know people who have seen regiments or troops, and it turned out they were not real. So we go there as a prayer group to help bring them to the light. So that's how I view ghosts. They're stuck. They're earthbound people who've passed and have not gone to the light. In a course I took at the Monroe Institute in Faber, Virginia, that's a really cool place, we were taught how to rescue people who are stuck. But that's something else. That's besides the point.
And so in the Monroe Institute, that's interesting because there have been public documents that have surfaced about the connection with the CIA and the Monroe Institute. Yes, absolutely. In the 80s, they did a lot of research, and Joseph McMoneagle, who was one of the first and chief, and I won't say best, but a very advanced remote viewer, came to the Institute to teach remote viewing to anybody who wanted to come and pay the tuition. And there's one woman on our team who went to that and learned how to do that. I met him at one of my trips to the Monroe Institute. Interesting man. His books are very, very interesting. And Joe worked for the government. Mm-hmm. That's where he was part of the original remote viewing team. Now, I saw a document which surprised me, that, yes, the government wanted to have people trained to do remote viewing, and they sent them there. And when I went... The HemiSync, do you know much about the HemiSync?
Oh, yeah, I use it for meditation. So you could say I'm a goner, huh? Yeah. But I used binaural beats way before I went to Monroe for meditation, to get you into delta and theta waves for meditation. And here's where you get really tricky. Because if you read the MK Ultra stuff and you look at the Manchurian Candidate stuff, the kind of training, they did use altered waves. I'm sure they used microwaves. They used drugs. They used every means in their power to change mind. Now, that's another subject altogether. Absolutely altogether. When I went to the Monroe Institute, took my first course there, one of the trainers said to me, "Are you in the CIA?" It shocked me. What? I didn't know why she said that to me. Why anyone would even think that for a second. But she asked me. I said, no. Look at me, I'm old.
Wow.
I would have been retired. I'm retired from federal service. I worked for the government at the VA. That was it. But you know what? This goes to the threading of what's good, what's bad, what's control, who's doing what to whom. And it's very complex.
It is. You're absolutely right.
It is.
Absolutely. And it's just, I mean, I could just talk to you for the rest of the week, I think.
Anytime, Erica, give me a call.
I know, seriously. It is. I'm so, thank you for sharing your personal experiences. And that takes a very, a really grounded person to share some of these things. But it's been very important, I believe, for people to have an understanding and maybe just make sure that we're all in a safe place and that we are protected, especially when it comes to things in the great unknown world of ufology, because things can happen.
But one thing I learned, we are way more than our bodies. Our bodies are, I was going to say disposable. They are. I'm 75. I may dispose of tomorrow. Who knows? But we are much more than our bodies. Our consciousness is much more than our bodies. Our consciousness reaches out, and we're not even aware. We're not even aware of who we really are. And for those people on a journey of growth, that's the search. Who we are. Why are we here? Is there a purpose in life? Is there a reason to exist, or is it just an accident of dad and mom screwing around and having a baby? I mean, let's think. Some people will think further, and some people won't, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
That is okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you, and I have to say, I love your hair.
I want you to know that when you told me you wanted me on your show, I said, oh, God, I have to go to the beauty parlor.
Well, it looks fabulous. And I'm sorry that other people, can't see it. But it's just you have beautiful hair. And I like that cut. It's really awesome on you. And it's been a pleasure to have you here.
Tell them it's silver. It's silver in color.
It's beautiful. If I could have gray hair like that, I would be totally down for that. But that's okay.
We got to talk some more. Okay.
We do. Thank you so much. And I want to just tell all my listeners, thank you for supporting UFO Classified, for sharing information. We're all on a journey, and we can learn from each other and grow in a lot of respects. And I want to thank Mady Tobias for being here. You can get her book, Dogs, God, and UFOs at Amazon, and I'll be posting some links to that. So all of you have a wonderful weekend. Be safe and love the people you're around and take care of them and
take care of yourself. Yes.
Yeah. And thank you so much.
You are very welcome. You're a joy to talk to,
Thank
Erica.
You. It's been
I
a lot
appreciate
of fun.
This so
Absolutely.
much. Thank you.
Fun. Thank you so much. And all right. I will talk to you soon. And good night, my friends. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Let me know when.
So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course the tinfoil hat guy's going to see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it's used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is, and you just kind of adapt and overcome.
What are you going to do with all this? You can't even take care of your own files and get them put into the current system, but yet you want to go collect other people's things. So what are you going to do with it? Who are you giving all this to?
It just really struck me about how the common thread seemed to be deception, but deception of human nature. So that's what I started thinking, who would these folks be? I mean, then I started thinking about the intelligence agencies, what role they could play, and what would be their motivations for getting involved in ufology.
me. I'm not saying that because the gimbal is not a rotating flying saucer, that means that all the UFOs are false. Not at all. All I'm doing is I'm looking at this one case, these individual cases, and seeing if there's an explanation for those. So try to, if I could ask people out there listening, don't think that I'm trying to attack your entire beliefs about these things.
Nice to be in orbit.
Want to hear something amazing? Discover matches all the cash back you earn on your credit card at the end of your first year, automatically, dollar for dollar, with no limit on how much you can earn. Extra cash? Come on, how amazing is that? In fact, it's even more amazing when you realize all the places where Discover is accepted. 99% of places in the U.S. that take credit cards. So when it comes to Discover, get used to hearing yes more often. Learn more at discover.com/yes. 2020 Nielsen Report limitations apply. Want to hear something amazing? Discover matches all the cash back you earn on your credit card at the end of your first year, automatically, dollar for dollar, with no limit on how much you can earn. Extra cash? Come on, how amazing is that? In fact, it's even more amazing when you realize all the places where Discover is accepted. 99% of places in the U.S. that take credit cards. So when it comes to Discover, get used to hearing yes more often. Learn more at discover.com/yes. 2020 Nielsen Report limitations apply.